Hello everybody and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video we will be talking about my updated election prediction between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. If you haven't noticed already, they are going to be the Democratic and Republican nominees for president. Joe Biden has been able to capture all but one Democratic contest in the Democratic primary, only losing American Samoa, where Jason Palmer, a venture capitalist, won 51 votes to Joe Biden's 40. But besides that, he has won every other state by really overwhelming margins in the vast majority of them. He has won 85% of the total popular vote, and Joe Biden has won 98.5. The only elected Democratic challenger to Joe Biden, Dean Phillips, a congressman from Minnesota, withdrew from the race yesterday and is actively endorsing Biden, is actively campaigning for Biden on social media at this time at least. So he is definitely going to be the Democratic nominee unless he willingly steps down and there's a switcheroo at the convention like some conservatives are claiming there will be. And then looking at the Republican ticket, we have the presumptive nominee. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee at this time. Yesterday, Nikki Haley, following Super Tuesday, withdrew from the race. It's done. She was the only candidate left. It was let's see, it was 12. It was 13 to start off with. 11 went down, and it was just Haley versus Trump by Super Tuesday, and Trump absolutely crushed it on Super Tuesday, only losing Vermont, and then a few days before that, losing D.C. to her. But even though he is not the incumbent president, he has been really able to capture this Republican Party and cruise to a very easy victory. We are going to have a very long general election because of how fast Donald Trump was able to clean up clean up the party, and win a quick, easy victory. So our matchup is going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. It is certain. And then we have the third party effect. We have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the race, who is polling tremendously high for an independent, usually at around 11, 12, or 13% on average. Then we have progressives like Cornel West, who's an independent running, but he probably won't get on the ballot in all 50 states. Kennedy probably will, or the vast majority, maybe 45. Um, and then we have Jill Stein from the Green Party. Remember, people blame her for, quote unquote, spoiling the election in 2016 and throwing the election to Trump because she won more votes in Michigan and Pennsylvania than was the margin between Trump and Hillary Clinton, if that makes sense. And her votes would have gone to Hillary Clinton. And then we have the Libertarians, of course, who will run a candidate. So we have many third parties, but two in particular, two independents. The Greens and the Libertarians always put up someone, but it's the independents this year, Kennedy and Cornel West, who will really make the difference because we usually don't have prominent independents like them, especially Kennedy. Gaining so many votes in a presidential race. Additionally, the No Labels organization meets tomorrow, and we will see if they put up a nominee. So this is our matchup. I do want Kennedy to be included. We'll get to see if I think he wins any states, but I do want him to be kept in mind because he does matter so much if he's winning, 10 to 20% in each state. So, starting my updated election prediction for March, we will begin with the safe Democratic states. So these states will be decided by a 15% margin or more for Joe Biden. That's California, Washington, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Delaware, probably Connecticut, and Vermont and Maine's 1st Congressional District, along with Illinois, probably, I'd say. And then moving on to Donald Trump's safe states, that's Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Nebraska's 3rd District, Nebraska's 1st District, and Nebraska at large. Oklahoma, I guess Kansas as well, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, and Indiana all go solidly for Donald Trump, as well as the state of South Carolina. So this is where I believe things stand, and I actually forgot a pretty major state that is, in a way, kind of in play to become likely. Not, Donald Trump doesn't have any chance of winning the state, but I could honestly see a reality where it is a likely state. That being the state of New York, big 28 electoral votes going to Joe Biden from there. So that puts Joe Biden in the lead at 159 electoral votes, Donald Trump at 122, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 0. So these are the states that are certain. We don't need to talk about them. We know where they're going to go. Now we move on to the what we call likely states. So these states will be decided by a 5 to 15% margin, so a bit closer, but we still generally do know how they're going to go. They are very unlikely to go to the other party than I characterized it. So beginning now, let's see. Virginia is definitely one. Virginia is a state that Hillary Clinton won quite handily in 2016, so that means something. It means that Democrats in this day and age have it locked down, and I think that Biden, these suburban voters have really shifted away from Donald Trump during his presidency, especially suburban moms, more well-educated voters have really turned away from the Republican Party as a whole. So I think that they would turn to Joe Biden once again. He won it by a very healthy margin in 2016. Definitely Colorado, if not a safe state. Honestly, this is one that has been trending to the left very much, like a lot in recent years. If you look at the 2022 results, the governor and senator did tremendously well here. And of course, Biden is going to do worse than a lot of these governors and senators because he is a weaker candidate, just because of his age and his unpopularity. I mean, I don't think I have to say this. The 2024 election will definitely shift to the right. Trump will gain from his numbers in 2020. That is for certain. So I think a state like Colorado gets a little closer, as well as New Mexico. That's, a very Democratic state, so it's not in play, but that one gets a little closer. Oregon was safe in 2020. That shifts a few points to the right. New Jersey was safe in 2020. That shifts a few points to the right. So that would, I would think, yeah, that is, those are the likely states, the likely Democratic states. And that puts Joe Biden at 209 electoral votes. Not many interesting calls there. As for Donald Trump, he has quite a few. Beginning with Alaska, this is a state that, you'd think they've turned their back on Donald Trump, considering they have elected a full delegation of moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats to Congress. But if you look at the Super Tuesday primary results here, Donald Trump crushed it here. So I don't think that this could get any closer than a likely margin. Trump probably wins it by about the same margin or more than he did in 2020. So Texas is going to trend or shift to the right tremendously in 2024 compared to 2020. If you remember, in 2020, there was talk that Joe Biden could win the state of Texas. It ended up being Republican, or Trump ended up winning by 5.6%. But since then, since Biden has become president, Latinos have trended towards the Republicans in such high numbers that, like, we have never seen anything like this before. Because Joe Biden is still associated with the all the financial issues, all the economic struggles a few years ago, and many Americans are still feeling it today. Especially such a economy driven voter bloc like Latinos will we have seen are trending to the right so much, and we are seeing this in poll after poll, and the Democratic Party is losing Latinos in such high numbers. So a state like Texas, we always knew it would go Republican in 2024, but it will trend. It will be very important to see how much it trends in 2024, because that is a key voter bloc. If you look at Nevada, Arizona, two critical swing states, especially when it comes to the Senate, and it has major effects, down the line. Senate, Congress, President, Latino voters voting Republican can change up our whole political universe. So a state like Texas definitely trends to the right. And then Florida, a huge number of Latino voters in the state of Florida. They dominate the voting bloc here. So Donald Trump will easily win that by a likely margin. He won it by 3.3 or 3 point something, 3.5. Yeah, 3.5, I believe, in 2020. Iowa and Ohio, two states that I honestly, especially Iowa, I was considering making safe. However, I decided against it. These are states that Trump has made so much more Republican. They were both Obama states in 2012, and Trump won them both by 9% in 2016. So you can just see that trend. Furthermore, they stayed with him. In 2020, they both voted for him by 7 in Ohio, I believe, and 8 in Iowa. So they really stayed with him while the rest of the country trended so much to the left. They kept their place. They did not trend to the left at all. They are with Trump, and in a year that will be more Republican than 2020, they are certainly going to stay with Donald Trump. Um, Looking now at the state of North Carolina. Now, this one is very tough um, because it will definitely be on that verge, between lean, but at that 5% margin, between lean and likely. Um, but honestly, I think I would have to say that North Carolina does go to Trump by a likely margin. I think that this state trends to the right in a very strong amount mostly because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And you will see this effect in every southern state, especially in all states with large African American populations, because Kennedy is polling really unexpected amount of African American voters from the Democratic Party. What he says about vaccines, vaccines has been an issue with black voters, their entire lives. There are always issues with vaccines for African Americans, and Kennedy's skepticism of vaccines is really resonating with these African American voters. And his message is really in many ways centered towards African Americans. So that will ultimately take many votes from Biden, especially in southern states with abundant African American populations like Georgia and North Carolina. And I think it would be just enough to put Donald Trump over the 5% threshold to make it a likely state in 2024. So that's it for likely states. So that puts Donald Trump takes the lead at 234 electoral votes. Joe Biden at 209. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. still at 0. Now, moving on to lean states. Lean states will be decided by a 1 to 5% margin. So now we're getting really close. These will be difficult to call, and they could change by election day. Starting with Joe Biden, of course. So Minnesota is going to be one that does stay Democrat. There are just too much of an abundant Democratic Party in the state of Minnesota. It is a historically Democratic state that just has simply too many Democrats for it to go Republican. It stayed with Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that's rare for a lot of these states. So if Hillary was able to win it in 2016, I think that since then, a few of these states have become more Democratic when it comes to the actual, party registration and everything. That I think that Biden will be able to hang on to it in 2024. Nebraska's second congressional district, I do think, is a lean margin win for Joe Biden. Here, it's filled with suburbs, and even though Trump is gaining in a lot of areas, especially urban areas and Latinos, as I said, even African American voters, he is gaining a lot of traction with in polls, especially African American men. He really isn't making up all that much ground in suburbs, especially after all these indictments, trials. That's not going to help him among parents. So Nebraska's second, I think, stays with Joe Biden. New Hampshire, I think, remains with Biden, but it does get very close. I think that this is towards a 1 or 2% margin. New Hampshire is a very white state and a state that can swing a lot because we have so many independent, open minded voters here. Hillary won this by something like 0.3% in 2016. And then in 2020, Biden won it by almost 8%. So you can just see how much it shifts. And I think that Donald Trump will make up a lot of ground among these more libertarian, more conservative minded voters, registered independent. But it won't be enough, but it does make the state really, really close. And then Maine at large, I do think that Biden does hold on to. He'll have enough turnout in Maine's first for that to happen. Not much of a surprise there. Um, and that's it for Joe Biden. I think that those are his only lean Democratic states. And you need 270 to win, by the way. So Biden is 44 away from victory. As for Donald Trump, I think that he has a few. Maine's second to begin with. Maine's second congressional district. I do think narrows up from 2020 only because the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. factor. RFK Jr. is going to pull a lot of votes in Maine. That will be maybe his best state, one of his best states. Perot came in second here in 1992. He did very well there. So, especially the second congressional district. So, Kennedy will come close. But he will take more, considering that Maine's second is a Republican, leaning district, in terms of party registration, just makes sense that Kennedy would pull more votes away from Trump than Biden there. Moving on, the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin flips. Their 10 electoral votes flip from 2020 to 2024, Democrat to Republican. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state of Wisconsin by 0.6%, less than a percentage point. It was so close. But in 2024, considering all of these financial issues that Americans are still feeling today, I mean, the fact that so few Americans can even buy a home still. There's inflation, but there are much larger issues that are going to affect a lot of these people's votes. And this is the matchup that no one wants, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. And I think that voter turnout will be historically low in 2024. And it will affect Biden more than Trump because Biden wins more independents. He wins more, forgive me for a lack of better term, or if this offends you, but he wins more normal voters, right? More normal people. While Donald Trump, your typical guy walking down the street. While while Donald Trump does really have his hardcore base that, for the vast majority, aren't going anywhere. They're not voting for Joe Biden, and you bet that they are turning up at the polls for Trump. So ultimately, I do think that, and this goes for many states, that this low turnout does hurt Biden a lot more than it does hurt Trump. And that will play out in the state of Wisconsin, especially in urban areas, in Milwaukee. I can't see many people, especially Biden 2020 voters, I can't see them all going out again and voting for Biden. He is so unpopular. So many people hate Biden for his age. He is losing so many ceasefire now, progressives, because he won't support a ceasefire in Gaza. He keeps on supporting Israel. And all of these factors are just hurting Biden. Well, Trump has issues too, but he still has the vast majority of, his 2020 voters. They will be encouraged to go out and vote for him again. Even though he might not gain many new voters, he still has his, and that's the difference between him and Joe Biden. Looking now at the state of Nevada, as I said, Latino voters trending to the right in historic amounts in 2024. I think that Nevada, state that Biden won by 2.4% in 2020. I think that flips to Donald Trump. That is another flip from 2020 to 2024. And then, those urban areas, Las Vegas, Reno, Carson City. I mean, I would just think that turnout is so depressed for the Biden campaign. I don't know, how many get out the vote things could possibly could possibly solve this problem for Joe Biden. And I'm just okay, so in the state of Georgia, I think that it flips to Donald Trump. This is yet another flip. 16 electoral votes voting from blue in 2020 to red in 2024. I think that Trump wins the state of Georgia. He Biden won it by something like 0.2 or 0.3% in 2020, some extremely small amount. And just when you consider the fact that Kennedy is pulling so many African Americans away from the Democrats, and that African Americans, so many are just completely done with the Democratic Party. They, even if they're unaware that Kennedy is even a candidate, they're not turning up because they think that the Democratic Party has just been taking advantage of them for so many decades now, and that they haven't done anything to solve their problems, so they are just not voting at all. And, as I said, there are issues for both candidates, but Biden just has a lot more. I don't think that Donald Trump has nearly enough loss among his 2020 vote that Biden does, and that Trump will end up winning the state of Georgia. So that is it for lean states. Still no candidate has won. It's 267 for Trump, 226 for Biden, 0 for RFK Jr. Tilt states now. This is very tough. I will start with Donald Trump, just because, well, no, I won't, because then it gives it away who wins. But Pennsylvania, I think, will be the closest state in 2024. Just because it is very difficult to, obviously it's going to be so difficult to predict, who will win, obviously, generally, but just the dynamics. There are progressives in Pennsylvania, and then there's African Americans in Pennsylvania, urban voters that Biden is losing. But and then there's rural voters, well, not rural, but working class. That's the word I'm trying to find. Rust Belt voters who will be heavily encouraged to vote for Donald Trump. But then you have the suburbs factor. There are many suburbs around Philadelphia. They've voted overwhelmingly for Biden in 2020, but still, even with that robust suburban turnout for Biden, he only won by 1.2% in the state of Pennsylvania in 2024. I think that he will lose a good amount of the suburbs, but even then, he's losing a lot of other voter blocks when, in the end, if he won it by a little more in 2020, I would think that he probably holds on in 2024. But he won it by such a narrow amount in 2020. He won Pennsylvania, and 2020 was his peak. I don't think that he could possibly do better than 2020, like in suburbs and in cities. That I think that Donald Trump is only going to gain, and I actually think that Trump flips the state of Pennsylvania. Um, uh, Tilt states are, by the way, under a 1% margin. So extremely close. Pennsylvania flips to Trump. I think that Arizona flips to Trump. Robust Latino shift from Democrat to Republican, as I mentioned earlier. Um, and I don't, there were a lot of moderate Republicans in Arizona who voted for Biden, but I think that they just stay home. They may still hate Trump and say they're never voting for Trump, but that doesn't necessarily hurt Biden or help Biden, because they will probably just stay home. These more moderate Republicans, these more anti-Trump Republicans who voted for Haley in the primary. So that just leaves Michigan, where I actually think, even though Biden won it by some 150,000 votes in 2020, um, it's so difficult to call. But Kennedy, honestly, I think that Kennedy might take enough votes away from Trump in these Rust Belt, very working class areas, because now Kennedy is that drain the swamp candidate, especially if he gets a lot of attention. By election day, he will be seen as more, especially among the working class, the more drain the swamp outsider candidate than Trump is, because Trump had those 4 years to drain the swamp. He didn't do that, and a lot of voters realize that, especially working class blue collar men in the Rust Belt. So I think that Kennedy actually pulls a lot of votes away from Trump in blue collar Michigan. That it will actually offset the this protest vote, these progressives voting against primary, or these progressives voting against Biden. As we saw in the primary, where they voted uncommitted on the ballot, to show that they don't approve of Joe Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. I think that Kennedy will offset that, and Kennedy is doing very well in Michigan. He almost has enough signatures to appear on the ballot. He definitely will appear on the ballot. So I actually think, and this is a change from my last prediction. I had Michigan going red and Pennsylvania going blue. Now it's Michigan blue, Pennsylvania red. So my final prediction for March, as it stands, Donald Trump wins back the presidency, 297 electoral votes. Joe Biden loses, 241. We get that Trump presidency once again. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. finishes last with 0. So thank you all for watching. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.